Today, we received a slew of documents connected to the investigation into the missing Sullivan children in Pictou County. 6-year-old Lilly and 4-year-old Jack vanished more than 3 months ago. Hundreds of pages of just-released court documents shed light on what police discovered. CTV late anchor Bruce Frisco has been pouring through it all and joins us with more in the news center. Bruce.
6-year-old Lilly Sullivan and her 4-year-old brother Jack vanished on a quiet May morning in Pictou County. What started as a simple missing persons call quickly unraveled into one of the most haunting and puzzling cases Nova Scotia has ever seen. A case that would spark community outrage, relentless searches, and a cloud of suspicion that refuses to lift even today. It was May 2nd, a Tuesday morning, calm and still. Around 10 a.m., their mother, Malaya Brooks Murray, picked up the phone and called the RCMP. Her voice, according to the dispatch records, carried urgency and panic. She told officers that her children, Lilly and Jack, had somehow wandered away from their small home in Landone Station. At first, it sounded like countless other cases the police receive every year. Children slipping out a door, chasing after a pet, or wandering into the woods that surround so many rural properties in Nova Scotia. But this one would prove very different. The first responding officers arrived quickly, expecting to find the children within minutes. Landone Station is a quiet, spread-out area, surrounded by forest, gravel roads, and open fields. Typically, when children go missing, especially as young as 4 and 6, they don't get far. They are usually found near the house, playing in the woods, or walking down a familiar path. Searchers often follow tiny footprints, toys, or pieces of clothing. Yet in this case, there was nothing. The children were simply gone. Neighbors later recalled that the morning had been strangely still. No one had seen Lilly or Jack playing outside, no one spotted them on the road, and there were no obvious signs of them entering the woods. For two small children to vanish without a trace in broad daylight was deeply unsettling. By midday, the search had escalated dramatically. RCMP officers expanded the search radius, calling in volunteer firefighters, local residents, and specialized K-9 units. Drones and helicopters were deployed, scanning the vast wooded area that surrounds Landone Station. Trained search and rescue crews swept the thick brush line by line. Every shed, barn, and abandoned structure in the area was checked. Officers even went door to door, asking neighbors if they had seen anything unusual that morning. The effort was massive. Within 24 hours, over 100 people were searching, and within 48 hours, that number doubled. Authorities described it as one of the largest search operations the region had seen in years. And yet, there was no sign of Lilly and Jack. No shoes. No footprints. No items of clothing. Nothing that could confirm where they went or how. The mother's account remained the starting point. She said she had been inside the house when she realized the children weren't around. At first, she thought they were just outside playing, but after calling for them and checking the yard, panic set in. That was when she dialed 911. On paper, it sounded simple enough. Children wandered away, got lost, and the community rallied to find them. But investigators quickly began to notice that something about the timeline didn't add up. For one, children that age don't typically wander off silently. Lilly was described as bright, curious, and talkative, a little girl who loved singing and making noise wherever she went. Jack, though younger, followed her everywhere, often carrying his favorite toy truck. Neighbors who lived just a few houses away claimed they didn't hear the children that morning at all. No laughter, no calling out, no sound of footsteps running through the gravel. Another issue was the terrain. The area around the Sullivan home is rugged, with thick forests and marshy patches. Search experts noted that if the children had walked into those woods, they would have left some kind of trail. Small footprints are easy to spot in soft ground, especially so soon after. But despite the dogs being brought in almost immediately, no scent trail was discovered leading away from the house. The K-9s repeatedly circled the property but couldn't pick up a solid track. This detail was troubling to investigators. In many missing child cases, even if the children cannot be found quickly, search dogs almost always detect a direction of travel, a path into the woods, a road they may have taken, or even just the yard where they last stood. Here, the trail seemed to end right at the home. As the hours dragged into days, the RCMP broadened their investigation. They interviewed everyone in the area, including friends, neighbors, and even people who had driven by that morning. They checked vehicles leaving Landowned Station, hoping to catch any clue that might suggest an abduction. Still, no one had seen a vehicle acting suspiciously. No one recalled a stranger in the area. Community members grew restless. For parents, the case was their worst nightmare. Children disappearing in the middle of the day from their own yard, with no trace left behind. Volunteers kept showing up, some searching through the night with flashlights, others combing the woods in groups, calling out the children's names until their voices cracked. Despite the enormous effort, each passing day brought frustration. People began asking difficult questions. How could 2 children just vanish without leaving anything behind? How could the dogs not pick up a trail? And why hadn't anyone seen them at all that morning? The focus, naturally, began to turn back toward the household. Investigators examined every detail of the mother's statement. What time did she last see the children? What exactly were they wearing? What had they eaten for breakfast? And most importantly, how much time had passed before she noticed they were gone and called the police? These questions mattered, because in cases like this, every minute is critical. The media seized on the story, broadcasting daily updates across Nova Scotia and beyond. Photos of Lilly and Jack spread rapidly online. Lilly with her long brown hair and bright smile, Jack with his round cheeks and the shy grin of a younger sibling. Their images became symbols of innocence, reminders of what was at stake. Posters appeared in storefronts, on community boards, and in car windows. The entire province seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for news. But news never came. Days turned into weeks, and the mystery deepened. Authorities admitted that while they were treating the case as a missing persons investigation, they could not rule out foul play. That phrase, foul play, struck a chord with the community. It suggested that maybe the children hadn't simply wandered off. Maybe something far darker had happened. Even as the official search scaled back, the questions only grew louder. How could Lilly and Jack vanish so completely in such a short window of time? Was this a tragic accident, a kidnapping, or something even more sinister? And beneath it all lingered the haunting truth. The last confirmed sighting of the children came not from neighbors or passers-by, but from their own mother's account. Beyond her statement, there was no independent confirmation that Lilly and Jack were seen outside that morning at all. The stage was set for one of the most troubling investigations Nova Scotia had ever faced, an investigation that would uncover shocking details, ignite public anger, and leave a lasting scar on the community. By 10:27 a.m., the first responding officers stepped onto the Sullivan property. Their training kicked in immediately. Every second mattered when 2 young children were unaccounted for. They began by documenting every single detail, no matter how small. Photographs were taken of the home's entry points, the yard, the dirt road that wound past the property. Officers noted the mother's exact words, the pauses in her sentences, the way her hands trembled or steadied as she spoke. They wrote down observations about her posture, about whether her story flowed naturally or if details seemed rehearsed. Even the body language of extended family members who had already arrived was catalogued. The smallest detail could later become the difference between solving the case and letting it slip into cold file obscurity. Yet, despite all this meticulous record-keeping, one critical detail was missing from the publicly released files: the exact time the children were last seen by their mother. That timestamp, one of the most vital pieces of information in any missing persons case, was not included in documents available to the public. Instead, it was blacked out, redacted, hidden from view. But that question continues to gnaw at anyone who has followed the case. Was it withheld because it contradicted her statement? Did it reveal a gap in time too large to ignore? Or was it removed to protect some aspect of the ongoing investigation? Whatever the reason, the absence of that detail immediately cast a shadow of doubt over the official timeline. Meanwhile, outside the home, the search had begun. Officers spread out across the property, their uniforms moving through the tall grass and scattered pines. Neighbors, upon hearing the news, didn't wait to be asked. They grabbed jackets, boots, and flashlights and began combing nearby fields and backroads. Soon, volunteers from the community joined in, some carrying walkie-talkies, others forming human chains to sweep through the woods methodically. By noon, the sound of dozens of voices calling out the children's names filled the air. Police dogs were brought in next. Handlers carefully let the animal sniff clothing belonging to Lilly and Jack. A shirt, a pair of shoes, a blanket. The dogs sniffed, circled, and pulled forward, their noses to the ground. But what should have been the most promising lead quickly dissolved into another puzzle. The dogs reacted only within the immediate property but never established a clear trail leading into the woods, onto the roads, or across nearby fields. They acted as though the children had never left the area, as though their scent simply ended at the house itself. That single observation disturbed investigators more than most people realized. In hundreds of similar cases, even when children go missing for days, dogs almost always pick up a path of travel. Whether it's footprints into a forest, tracks along a roadside ditch, or even a faint scent trail into town, there is usually some trace to follow. But here? Nothing. The dogs circled again and again, then sat down, signaling to handlers that the trail had gone cold. As the hours wore on, search efforts grew larger, more frantic. By the end of the day, helicopters buzzed overhead, their thermal imaging cameras scanning treetops and marshland for any sign of life. Officers on ATVs crisscrossed the terrain, shouting the children's names into the heavy air. Search and rescue experts marked grids on maps, ensuring that every square meter of land was covered. Despite the enormous scope of the operation, not a single clue surfaced. The absence of evidence was, in itself, suspicious. Normally, when children vanish, even the smallest piece of evidence, a sock snagged on a branch, a shoe left in the mud, a toy dropped in panic, emerges quickly. But in this case, there were no footprints, no clothing, no signs of movement beyond the home. It was as though Lilly and Jack had evaporated into thin air. Community members who participated in the early searches later admitted that doubts set in almost immediately. Kids don't just disappear without a trace, one neighbor said quietly to reporters months later. If they'd wandered, we would have found something, anything. But there was nothing. That's what scared us most. Even officers on the ground began to privately question the narrative. If the children had wandered away between 9:30 and 10 a.m., as suggested, how could no one have seen them? Landone Station wasn't densely populated, but there were enough homes along the gravel roads that a sighting seemed inevitable. Add to that the fact that Lilly, at 6 years old, was described as lively, vocal, and prone to singing loudly wherever she went, while Jack, though younger, almost always followed close behind, chattering to her. It seemed impossible that two energetic children could cross yards or fields without anyone noticing. As days passed, the silence surrounding the case grew deafening. The official search turned up nothing, leaving more questions than answers. Was this really a tragic case of two children wandering into the woods, or had something else happened inside that home before police arrived? Why had the RCMP been so careful to keep the mother's timeline incomplete in their release documents? From the very beginning, even before the first week had ended, there was a sense that something about the Sullivan case didn't add up. The clues weren't just missing, they had never been there to begin with. And in that absence, suspicion began to grow. 10 long days had passed since Lilly and Jack Sullivan vanished, and the once frantic energy of the search was beginning to shift into something darker. The initial hope, that the children had simply wandered into the woods and would be found alive, was fading with every sunrise that revealed no trace of them. By now, the RCMP had combed through miles of terrain, searched barns, sheds, ditches, and creeks, and interviewed every neighbor within reach. With nothing to show for it, investigators knew they had to pivot. If the ground wasn't giving them answers, perhaps the people closest to the children would. It was at this point that police turned to one of the most controversial tools in their arsenal, the polygraph, commonly known as the lie detector test. Though not admissible as evidence in Canadian courts, the polygraph has long been used by law enforcement as an investigative measure, less a tool for courtroom proof, and more a psychological lever to gauge honesty, create pressure, and eliminate suspects. The first to take the test was the mother, Malaya Brooks Murray. She had been under scrutiny since day one, if only because parents are always the first examined in cases of missing children. Her demeanor, her words, and even the missing timestamp of when she last saw her children alive all made investigators wary. Yet when she sat down for the polygraph, she passed. The machine did not register signs of deception in her responses. Next was the stepfather, Daniel Mart. As the man helping raise Lilly and Jack, his role in the household had to be scrutinized. He too was asked the difficult questions. Did he know what happened to the children? Did he play any role in their disappearance? Did he have knowledge he wasn't sharing? Like the mother, Daniel also passed the test. Investigators then turned to the children's biological father, Jack Sullivan. Though he did not live with the children full-time, his connection to them could not be ignored. Custody arrangements, past tensions, and family dynamics all made him a necessary subject for testing. He also passed. 3 passes in a row. On paper, it seemed to clear the immediate family members. But then came the test that still raises eyebrows today. The step-grandmother, Cheryl, was brought in for questioning and given a polygraph. Unlike the others, her results were neither a clear pass nor an outright fail. They were labeled inconclusive. The machine could not determine with certainty whether she was telling the truth or concealing something. In the world of polygraphs, inconclusive can mean many things: nervousness, stress, medical conditions, or evasiveness. But in a high-stakes case like this, inconclusive results cast a long shadow. Why were Cheryl's results different from the others? Was it a matter of nerves, as some suggested, or was it a signal that she knew something she wasn't saying? Police never publicly elaborated on this point, and the ambiguity has fueled endless debate within the community. Despite the polygraph results, authorities made one thing clear: the case was not officially a criminal investigation, not yet. At that stage, the disappearance was still classified as a missing persons case. But that distinction did little to calm suspicion. The absence of evidence, combined with the family dynamics and now the inconclusive test, made many wonder if the RCMP were holding back critical information. Behind the scenes, detectives pressed harder. They conducted re-interviews, checked alibis, and analyzed phone records. Every timeline was scrutinized, every detail revisited. They knew that in cases involving missing children, if foul play is suspected, it often leads back to someone within the family circle. The challenge here was that, on paper, the family members had cleared one of the biggest hurdles: passing the polygraph. Only Cheryl's inconclusive result left the door cracked open, hinting at the possibility of hidden truths. The community, too, was watching closely. News of the polygraph tests spread quickly, and while some took comfort in the fact that the parents had passed, others weren't convinced. Many argued that polygraphs were unreliable to begin with. After all, someone who is calm under pressure can lie and still pass, while someone anxious and fearful, even if innocent, can trigger inconclusive or deceptive readings. To the public, the tests offered no closure, only more fuel for speculation. Still, investigators continued pressing forward. Each polygraph session was another piece in a complex puzzle, another way to rule people in or out. With no physical evidence emerging from the land, the RCMP leaned heavily on human behavior, psychology, and pressure. Even without classifying the case as criminal, their actions signaled one thing clearly: they were no longer just looking for lost children in the woods. They were now searching for truth among the people closest to Lilly and Jack. The line between missing persons and criminal investigation was blurring, and for many following the case, the question was no longer if foul play was involved, but who, within the circle of trust, might have been responsible. Every family member came under suspicion. The mother, whose account remained the foundation of the timeline. The stepfather, whose presence in the household made him impossible to ignore. And now, even the grandmother, her inconclusive polygraph lingering like a stain on the record. In a case built almost entirely on fragments, redacted times, vague sightings, inconclusive tests, uncertainty was inevitable. And in the absence of certainty, suspicion always grows. That suspicion was not confined to the investigation room. It bled out into the community, taking root in coffee shops, church basements, and grocery store aisles. In a small town like Landon Station, people know each other by name, by face, by family history. The sudden disappearance of two children didn't just shake households, it disrupted the very rhythm of daily life. And with disruption came whispers. Neighbors began dissecting every movement of the Sullivan family. Some said the mother's reaction seemed too calm, that her composure suggested she knew more than she let on. Others defended her, pointing out that grief and shock can take strange forms, and not everyone reacts with hysteria. The stepfather, Daniel, too, became the subject of scrutiny. Locals questioned his role in the children's lives, his influence over the household, and whether he had truly been forthcoming with police. Even extended relatives, grandparents, aunts, and uncles were pulled into the web of speculation. In small towns, secrets don't stay hidden for long. Every detail, no matter how trivial, became fuel for rumor. Did anyone see the children that morning other than the mother? Why did the police redact the last confirmed sighting from their files? How could the search dogs find nothing? And why, after such a massive operation, had the children left behind not a single trace? Each unanswered question added weight to the growing suspicion, and each retelling in hushed tones added distortion, until fact and rumor blurred into one. The RCMP tried to control the narrative, urging the public not to speculate, but it was impossible to stop. When children vanish without explanation, people naturally try to fill the void with their own stories. The absence of evidence became a breeding ground for theories. Some believed the children had been taken by a stranger passing through, despite no vehicle sightings. Others were convinced that the answer lay within the household, that someone close to Lilly and Jack knew exactly what had happened. In that vacuum of clarity, even kindness became suspect. When relatives cried on camera, some whispered that their tears looked forced. When they stayed out of the spotlight, others claimed it was avoidance. The community's hunger for answers created a cruel paradox. No matter how family members behaved, it was interpreted as evidence of guilt. The grandmother's inconclusive polygraph only poured gasoline on the fire. For many, it was the first tangible crack in the family's united front. If one member's results couldn't be trusted, what else might be hidden? Was it nerves or knowledge that made the needle jump on the machine? Police didn't say, but the silence only deepened the divide between what investigators knew and what the public feared. And so, suspicion thickened. It wasn't just about what had been said, but what hadn't. Not just about what was known, but about what was carefully omitted. The family, once a unit bound together in grief, became fractured under the weight of the town's collective gaze. Every glance, every whispered conversation at the edge of a driveway, every sideways look at the grocery store carried the same unspoken question. Which one of them knows the truth? In cases like this, suspicion isn't just a byproduct of mystery. It becomes its own kind of evidence. The longer the uncertainty lingers, the louder the whispers grow. And in a town as small and tight-knit as Pictou County, whispers can echo louder than facts. A single day after Lilly and Jack vanished, investigators thought they had finally stumbled onto the first real breakthrough. In a wooded area roughly 1 kilometer from the Sullivan home, searchers found a small, pink blanket. It was Lilly's. The discovery sent a jolt of hope and dread through the search teams. Hope, because at last there was something tangible, something belonging to the children. Dread, because a blanket abandoned so far from the house suggested the children had been in distress, or worse, taken against their will. At first, the find was treated like gold. Officers cordoned off the area, photographing the blanket from every angle before carefully bagging it for evidence. Forensic specialists swabbed it for DNA, hair, and fibers, hoping it might carry a clue to where Lilly had gone, or who she had been with. For a few hours, it seemed like this was the missing puzzle piece that could finally lead investigators forward. But when the dogs were brought in, everything fell apart. Handlers gave the blanket to the search dogs, expecting them to pick up Lilly's scent trail immediately. In most cases, this kind of discovery is invaluable. Dogs trained for scent work can often track a child's path from an item of clothing or a toy, even if days have passed. But here, something was terribly wrong. The dogs didn't respond as expected. They sniffed the blanket, circled, and then gave handlers nothing. No direction, no pull into the woods, no indication that the scent trail extended beyond the immediate area. It was as if the blanket had appeared there on its own, untouched by the children. This result baffled search experts. A blanket carried by Lilly should have been saturated with her scent, especially if she had been holding or sleeping with it recently. Yet according to reports, the dogs acted as if it belonged to no one. For investigators, that raised a chilling possibility. Was the blanket deliberately planted? The community seized on this theory almost immediately. How could the blanket belong to Lilly, be found a kilometer away, and yet hold no trackable scent? Some believed the children had never been near that location at all, that someone had taken the blanket from the home and dropped it there as a distraction. Others wondered if it had been washed or tampered with, stripping away its smell before being placed where it was discovered. RCMP statements offered little clarity. Officials confirmed the blanket's discovery but gave no public explanation for why the dogs failed to trace it. That silence only deepened speculation. If the blanket was genuine evidence, why wasn't it leading anywhere? And if it wasn't, why was it there at all? To the family, the discovery was heartbreaking. Seeing a belonging of Lilly's out in the woods, without her, made the nightmare all the more real. But to the broader community, the blanket quickly became less a sign of hope and more a symbol of something deeply unsettling. It was proof that something about this case wasn't following the rules of logic. Neighbors whispered, "Who found it? When was it dropped there?" Could the children have really walked that far on their own in such a short time? A 6-year-old and a 4-year-old, together, wandering a kilometer into rough terrain without anyone noticing, without footprints, without leaving a trail behind. It strained belief. The fact that the blanket led nowhere only amplified the sense of dread. In missing child investigations, every small item usually opens a path forward. A shoe, a toy, or a piece of clothing can guide dogs and searchers closer to where the children went. But in this case, the blanket was a dead end. A clue that wasn't a clue at all. As one search volunteer later put it, that blanket gave us hope for about 5 minutes. Then it gave us more questions than answers. And in a mystery already riddled with gaps and contradictions, the blanket became one of the most haunting fragments of all. Was it a breadcrumb that should have led investigators closer to Lilly and Jack? Or was it a planted piece of misdirection designed to confuse everyone and shift focus away from the truth? Days later, another piece of the same blanket surfaced. This time, in the garbage at the end of the family's driveway. The discovery sent shockwaves through the already tense investigation. For law enforcement, it wasn't just a misplaced scrap of fabric. It was a breadcrumb that raised more questions than answers. Why would 2 pieces of the same blanket appear in 2 entirely different locations, days apart? And more importantly, who put them there? Investigators began to dissect the possibilities. If the blanket had naturally torn and ended up scattered, why were the pieces found in such deliberate, almost staged spots? The first piece, lying out in a field 1 kilometer away, had felt suspiciously clean, devoid of scent, as though it had been carefully placed there rather than carried off by children or animals. Now, the second piece turned up not in some random ditch or roadside, but in the family's own garbage. The symbolism was chilling. For detectives, 3 theories quickly surfaced. 1. The blanket was planted deliberately to throw off searchers, to create a false trail leading nowhere. 2. It had been disposed of hastily in a moment of panic by someone in the household. Or 3. It was placed there by someone else entirely, someone with access to the property who wanted to insert themselves into the narrative. Each possibility was as disturbing as the next. The community, meanwhile, erupted in speculation. In the small town of Pictou County, where everyone knows everyone, whispers turned into full-blown accusations. Some pointed fingers at the mother, Malaya Brooks Murray. How could she explain a child's cherished blanket winding up in the trash? Others suspected the stepfather, Daniel Martel, who had been under a shadow of mistrust since the early days of the investigation. Even the grandmother, already questioned after inconclusive polygraph results, found herself pulled deeper into the web of suspicion. The unsettling part was that none of these theories had solid proof. The blanket pieces were devoid of usable forensic evidence. No hairs, no fibers linking to the children, no traceable DNA, at least, none that police disclosed publicly. That silence only deepened the mystery. If the children had truly vanished on their own, their blanket would have carried the scent trail dogs could follow. Yet both times, the canines came up empty. It was as though the fabric had been scrubbed of any connection to Lilly and Jack before being planted. Some search volunteers, recalling the discovery, described a gut-wrenching moment of realization. A blanket is no ordinary object for a child. It's a source of comfort, something clutched tightly at night, dragged across floors, soaked with the smell of home. For Lilly, the pink blanket was practically an extension of herself. To find it discarded in garbage bags, filthy, crumpled, stripped of its innocence, was almost too much to bear. For many, it transformed the case from a hopeful missing person search into something darker. Reporters latched onto the blanket mystery as well. Headlines framed it as the clue that didn't fit. On talk radio, hosts debated whether it was a message from the perpetrator, a breadcrumb trail meant to taunt police. Others wondered if it signaled guilt within the family itself, an unconscious slip, a desperate attempt to distance themselves from something they couldn't explain. Behind closed doors, police reportedly canvassed garbage collection routes, neighbors' trash bins, and timelines of when the bags had been placed at the curb. If the blanket fragment had been inside the bag before the disappearance, why wasn't it noticed earlier? If it had been placed after, who had access to do it unnoticed? Surveillance footage from nearby homes was combed through, but yielded no definitive answers. Adding to the unease was the timing. The blanket's appearance in the garbage happened just as public pressure on the RCMP was mounting. People were demanding results. The search was stretching into days with no breakthrough. And suddenly, here was this new discovery right on the family's doorstep. Was it too convenient? Too perfectly placed to shift suspicion inward? The psychological weight of the blanket cannot be overstated. For many, it marked the moment when hope began to fracture. If the children had simply wandered off, the odds of a cherished belonging winding up in the trash seemed impossibly small. Instead, it hinted at human hands, deliberate actions, choices that spoke of concealment rather than accident. To this day, the blanket remains one of the most haunting pieces of evidence in the Sullivan case. It doesn't offer clarity, it offers contradiction. A clue that raises more doubt than resolution. Was it the smoking gun of a cover-up, or just the cruel misfortune of coincidence? Police have never provided closure on that question. And for a community desperate for truth, that silence is almost unbearable. Because if the blanket was planted, then the real question becomes, what else was planted, hidden, or erased in the days after Lilly and Jack disappeared? Natasha Hayward's account instantly shook the foundation of the investigation. Her words carried the weight of possibility, the kind of detail that could turn a stagnant case on its head. She told police she hadn't just seen two children, but two children who matched the exact descriptions of Jack and Lilly Sullivan. Natasha described them vividly: a boy with tousled dirty blonde hair, wearing shorts, and a girl with neat little pigtails, dressed in a tank top. They weren't running, panicked, or disoriented the way you'd expect two missing children to be. They were calm. They were holding hands. And more chillingly, they weren't alone. Natasha said she saw them walking toward a woman who stood by an older model sedan. She was clear about the car's appearance. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't new, but it stood out in its ordinariness. The shade, as she recalled, was somewhere between tan, gray, and gold. Not a striking color, but muted, the kind of vehicle that could blend seamlessly into the background of any neighborhood or rural road. The woman, she claimed, appeared to be waiting. Not coincidentally, not passing by, waiting. That distinction is important. Natasha's statement implied intent. Someone had been there to meet the children. Whether the kids went willingly or not became the haunting question that lingered in every conversation after her testimony. Police treated Natasha's statement seriously. They canvassed the area again, scouring through surveillance footage from nearby roads, stores, and intersections. Every tan, gray, or gold sedan in the county suddenly became suspicious. Drivers were questioned. Vehicle registration logs were checked. But as is often the case in rural communities, surveillance coverage was spotty at best. Too many roads, too few cameras. Too many opportunities for a car to disappear into the backroads of Pictou County without a trace. Still, Natasha was insistent. Her description wasn't vague in her mind. She truly believed she had seen Jack and Lilly. She remembered their small hands linked together, a detail that made the sighting all the more emotional. They were together, not wandering separately, not frightened. The way she told it, they almost seemed guided, as though they were being led into the unknown without realizing what was happening. Investigators were divided. On one hand, her statement provided a potential lead when everything else felt like dead ends. On the other hand, it complicated things. If Natasha was right, then the disappearance wasn't a case of children wandering into the woods or falling into a river. It was something darker. It meant someone had them. And then came the doubts. Witness statements in missing children cases are notoriously tricky. Memory plays strange tricks, especially under stress. Was Natasha remembering that day clearly? Could she have seen different children entirely? Or worse, had she misremembered the details after hearing descriptions of Jack and Lilly repeated endlessly on the news? Her story added fuel to the fire of speculation in the community. To some, she was the voice of truth, the only person brave enough to speak up about what she saw. To others, she was a distraction, leading investigators down a false path while precious time slipped away. But Natasha never wavered. She insisted that what she saw was real, and she repeated her account with consistency, even as weeks turned into months. For the families, her words were both a blessing and a curse. To Malaya Brooks Murray, the children's mother, the possibility that they had been seen alive should have brought relief. Yet it also brought more questions. If they had been seen walking toward a car, who was the woman? And why had no one else come forward to corroborate Natasha's story? For the RCMP, it became a matter of balancing hope with evidence. They couldn't dismiss her outright, but they couldn't confirm it either. They didn't have footage, they didn't have additional witnesses, they didn't even have a license plate. Just a description of two children, a waiting woman, and a nondescript sedan. The community latched onto the idea of the car. In a small county, people notice vehicles that don't belong. Social media groups buzzed with theories. Some claimed they remembered seeing a tan or gold sedan parked on rural roads in the days before the disappearance. Others insisted they had seen nothing unusual at all. But whispers grew louder. Was someone watching the Sullivan children before May 2nd? The possibility of an abduction became harder to ignore. And Natasha's words painted a chilling picture, that if an abduction had occurred, it wasn't frantic or violent. It was calm, almost staged. The children weren't dragged or forced. They walked. They held hands. They trusted the person waiting for them. That was perhaps the most haunting part of her testimony. Did the children know the woman? Was she familiar to them in some way? Or had she lured them with promises, a friendly face, a gentle tone, the kind of manipulation predators use to gain trust? That question lingered like a shadow over every search party, every interview, every sleepless night for their family. As investigators chased down every possible tan, gray, or gold sedan in Nova Scotia, Natasha's voice became both the most hopeful and most controversial element of the case. And as time passed, with no concrete evidence to validate her sighting, doubt crept in. But still, her words hang in the air, etched into the timeline of May 2nd. A boy in shorts, a girl in pigtails, their small hands linked as they walked toward an older sedan, and the woman waiting beside it. The reliability of eyewitness accounts has long been a contested topic in investigative circles, and Natasha Hayward's statement perfectly illustrates why. In her initial interview, her voice carried conviction, her words painting a vivid scene. A boy and girl, small, innocent, holding hands in the morning light. The description of the girl's pigtails and the boy's shorts instantly resonated with what the public knew about Lilly and Jack. For a desperate community clinging to hope, her account felt like the first real crack in the suffocating darkness surrounding the case. But soon after, when Hayward admitted that the children she saw might have been older, the once promising lead began to unravel. A single phrase, "they may have been older," was enough to shift the entire meaning of her testimony. The certainty she once carried transformed into doubt, and that doubt infected everything about her story. Eyewitness testimony can act like a double-edged sword. On one side, it can provide the missing puzzle piece, placing victims, suspects, or vehicles at a crucial location. On the other, when uncertainty seeps in, it muddies the waters, dragging investigators in directions that ultimately waste time and resources. In the Sullivan case, Hayward's words briefly created a picture of Lilly and Jack alive, walking toward an unfamiliar woman near an older model sedan. For investigators, this raised immediate questions. Who was the woman? Was she a stranger, a neighbor, or someone tied to the family? What about the car? Tan, gray, or gold? Colors vague enough to apply to dozens of vehicles in the area. Detectives had to act quickly, canvassing neighborhoods, questioning residents about parked or passing vehicles, even reviewing surveillance footage from local businesses in hopes of catching a glimpse of the sedan. But when Hayward admitted her uncertainty, everything slowed. How could police pursue a lead when the witness herself no longer stood firmly behind it? Yet they couldn't simply dismiss it either. Even a fragile account had to be examined. Detectives retraced the timeline, asking, if Lilly and Jack were truly seen on that road, what time would it have been? Did it align with the mother's account? Could the children have walked that far in such a short window? And if they were indeed with a woman, did this point toward abduction? Or perhaps complicity from someone known to the family? Meanwhile, the community latched onto Hayward's story with fierce intensity. In coffee shops, on porches, and in the aisles of grocery stores, people whispered about the woman with the car. Was she real? A local? Someone passing through? Online forums buzzed with speculation. Every tan sedan in Pictou County became suspect. Some claimed they had seen such a car lingering near schools or playgrounds. Others said they recalled nothing of the sort. As the story spread, fear grew. Parents held their children tighter, suspicious of unfamiliar faces in town. The presence of a mysterious vehicle, whether confirmed or not, injected paranoia into daily life. For investigators, the dilemma was clear. Hayward's statement could not be entirely trusted, but it also could not be ignored. The possibility, however slim, that Lilly and Jack were seen alive, in the company of another adult, carried too much weight to be discarded. Teams began cross-referencing her description against known associates of the family, individuals with histories of custody disputes, or anyone with vehicles matching the vague color palette. Still, without corroboration, the lead hung in limbo. What made the situation more difficult was the psychological effect of false hope. Families of missing children often cling to even the faintest suggestion of a sighting. For Malaya Brooks Murray and her relatives, Hayward's account briefly ignited a fragile spark. Maybe the children were out there, alive, waiting to be found. But when that hope faltered, when the witness herself backtracked, the emotional toll deepened. Each false start became another wound, another reminder of the uncertainty consuming the case. The ambiguity of Hayward's sighting underscores the central tension of the Sullivan mystery. Every clue comes with contradictions, every lead phrase at the edges. If her account was accurate, it pointed to abduction, perhaps even trafficking. If inaccurate, it meant hours of manpower had been poured into a mirage. Either way, the effect was the same. Police remained at square one, forced to question every narrative, every timeline, and every assumption. Even today, years later, her statement lingers in the public consciousness like a half-faded photograph. Some argue it was the most important clue of the investigation, proof that Lilly and Jack didn't simply vanish into thin air. Others insist it was nothing more than a mistake, a case of two older children mistaken for the missing siblings in a town desperate for answers. And therein lies the tragedy. When memory falters and evidence fails, truth becomes slippery, and with it, justice drifts further out of reach. In the end, Hayward's testimony remains suspended between possibility and doubt. It represents the fragile line investigators must walk in cases like these, where every detail matters and every uncertainty threatens to obscure the truth. Did she see Lilly and Jack alive on that May morning, walking hand in hand toward a stranger? Or did her mind, influenced by headlines and photos of the missing children, fill in gaps that weren't really there? The answer, like so much in this case, may never be fully known. Police dug into every available lead, dissecting the family's world minute by minute. They subpoenaed phone records, looking for calls or texts that might reveal panic, planning, or deception. They checked for unusual activity, late-night calls, contacts to strangers, deleted messages that could suggest coordination. Then they moved on to banking activity, scrutinizing every deposit, withdrawal, or transfer. Were there sudden cash movements? Unexplained purchases? Signs of financial strain or preparation for a hurried escape? Nothing. Every account appeared normal, almost too normal, as though someone had scrubbed away any trace of irregularity. From there, investigators combed through hours of surveillance footage. Gas stations, highway overpasses, convenience stores, local businesses, anywhere a vehicle might have been caught on camera that morning. They pulled recordings from traffic cameras, bank ATMs, even doorbell cameras in surrounding neighborhoods. Yet each video seemed to lead nowhere. No confirmed sightings of the children. No vehicle matching the vague description from Natasha Hayward's account. No image of Lilly's pink blanket being discarded. It was as if the children had vanished into an empty space, a void where cameras somehow missed the most critical moments. When the family's court files were finally released to the public, they were riddled with black bars, entire sections redacted. Dates, times, and specific exchanges hidden from view. Pages that might have revealed the last confirmed sighting of the children were heavily censored. For investigators, such redactions were standard procedure, protecting ongoing investigations, shielding sensitive details, and preventing false leads. But for the public, these black lines became symbols of secrecy. Every missing word was interpreted as a cover-up. Every hidden timestamp raised questions. What are police hiding? Why withhold critical information when 2 children remain missing? The incomplete timelines only added fuel to the fire. What exact time did Malaya, their mother, last see Lilly and Jack? Was it minutes before her 10 a.m. call to police, or hours earlier? Without this detail, the timeline cracked open. Did the children vanish while everyone was asleep? Did something happen overnight that wasn't reported until later? Or did the story change between the moment of panic and the moment police arrived? The uncertainty made it impossible for outsiders to trust what little remained visible in the files. Context was missing everywhere. Statements taken from family members were redacted, stripped of their tone, their inconsistencies, and their contradictions. A note from officers observing body language hinted at suspicions, but the specifics were blacked out. Did someone seem evasive? Did their story falter under pressure? The public would never know. Even records of polygraph tests, the very tool used to gauge truthfulness, were filtered down to simple outcomes: passed, inconclusive, or redacted. For the tight-knit community of Pictou County, these gaps bred chaos. In the absence of official answers, neighbors turned to speculation. Some insisted the children must have been taken by an outsider, an abduction by a stranger, quick and precise. Others whispered that the truth lay closer to home, hidden in family secrets and fractured relationships. Online forums picked apart the blacked-out pages line by line, attempting to reconstruct the missing pieces. They argued over the credibility of Natasha Hayward's sighting, over whether the blanket had been planted, over why RCMP refused to declare the case criminal despite overwhelming suspicion. Meanwhile, the family lived under a microscope. Every trip to the grocery store, every glance at a neighbor, every social media post became a piece of evidence for or against them in the court of public opinion. The redactions gave the impression of a puzzle with pieces deliberately withheld, and in that vacuum, the community filled in their own answers often darker than reality. For investigators, the challenge was daunting. They were forced to balance transparency with strategy, knowing that revealing too much could compromise the case, but revealing too little could destroy public trust. Each redacted page was both a shield and a wound, protecting the integrity of the investigation while deepening the mystery. And so the trail of Lilly and Jack Sullivan grew colder, buried under paperwork that revealed just enough to spark outrage, but never enough to bring closure. Each unanswered question dangled like a thread, waiting for the one piece of truth that might unravel everything. Posters of Lilly and Jack still hang in store windows, their smiling faces fading with the sun and curling at the edges from months of weather. To the community, they aren't just missing children. They're constant reminders of unanswered questions, of a story that never reached its ending. Every glance at those posters brings back the raw ache of that May morning, reopening wounds that never had the chance to heal. The community continues to gather for vigils, each candlelit circle a fragile attempt to keep hope alive. Mothers hold their own children a little tighter, fathers walk their kids to the bus stop even if it means being late for work. Everyone feels the shadow of Lilly and Jack's absence. It is no longer just a family's tragedy, it's a communal scar. Still, under the prayers and the flowers left at makeshift memorials, whispers linger. Whispers that sting. Some believe the children may have simply wandered off, curious, adventurous, caught in the woods or near the water where dangers are plenty. But others can't accept that. 2 children, both vanishing without a single trace? No tracks, no belongings, no final sighting? For many, that explanation feels impossible. Then there's the darker possibility, the fear that someone took them. The idea of an abduction is a weight too heavy for many in Pictou County to carry, but it's there, lingering at the edge of every conversation. Natasha Hayward's uncertain sighting only deepens this unease. Was she mistaken? Or did she witness something that could have changed everything if only it had been clearer? The police files, with their heavy black lines and missing details, only worsen the tension. Why redact the last time the children were seen by their mother? Why withhold timelines that could provide clarity? To the public, each missing word feels like a hidden truth, a deliberate secret. And when people are left in the dark, they fill the gaps with theories, sometimes reasonable, sometimes wild, but always fueled by the same desperate need, answers. For the families, the pressure is unbearable. Each interview, each rumor, each sideways glance at the grocery store carries unspoken accusations. The mother, the stepfather, the grandmother, all have been under the spotlight, their lives dissected and doubted. Even when police clear them publicly, suspicion lingers. In a case with so few certainties, every relative becomes both a victim and a suspect in the court of public opinion. And so, the town stands divided. Some cling fiercely to the hope that Lilly and Jack are alive, perhaps taken but still out there, waiting to be found. Others, hardened by silence and the weight of time, quietly fear the worst, that the children are gone forever, and only the truth of how and why remains hidden. But what if the answer lies not in the woods, not in an abductor's car, but in those redacted lines, the parts of the investigation the public was never meant to see? The truth could be buried there, behind the black ink that shields critical pieces of the timeline. It could explain why dogs lost the scent at the blanket, why the family's driveway became a stage for suspicion, why every trail led to nowhere. Until those answers come, the story remains frozen in time. Every birthday that passes without Lilly and Jack is marked not with celebration, but with grief. Every holiday dinner leaves 2 empty places at the table. And every May, the air in Pictou grows heavier, the silence more deafening, as the community remembers the day the Sullivan children vanished. The trail is cold. The posters are fading. But the questions burn hotter than ever. Did Lilly and Jack wander into danger on their own? Were they led away by someone they trusted? Or does the truth live in shadows, carefully hidden by those who know more than they've said? For now, only silence answers back. The mystery remains, haunting, unresolved, and deeply rooted in the heart of Nova Scotia.